it's basically a combination of two questions, which essentially is asking what's going to happen to banks with a lot of oil exposure. So the basic question here, I think, or the basic thing to understand here is that certain banks are exposed a lot more to oil than others. And the type of bank and the size of that bank is going to matter a lot. So, for example, JP Morgan, yes, it has energy exposure, but it's huge and it has a hugely diversified portfolio. It's probably not, it's going to hurt, but it's not going to take the bank out of business. Now, let's go to Texas to a small community bank that has energy exposure both in its portfolio and then also to the people that it's lending to. So, for example, say you have a guy who works out in an oil field and he has a mortgage with that bank, and he gets laid off because they're not making enough money and suddenly he can't pay his mortgage anymore. It's going to hurt a bank like that a lot more than it's going to hurt one of your big banks of the world.
Yeah. I mean, if you listen to the conference calls of the big banks, I mean, you're talking like 1% of their portfolios of their loan portfolios are energy related. And in those portfolios, a lot of these banks are marking those down. They're taking reserves on those, assuming that oil stays at $30 a barrel. So they're being pretty aggressive about it. But the big point, and this is exactly what Gabby is saying, is that it's the banks that have a large amount of exposure, relative to their overall loan portfolio, to either the energy market or other markets that would be impacted by that, like real estate markets in Texas, things like that. And let me just give you just a quick example of like how bad it can get. In the 1970s, we had a couple oil crises, and then in the 1980s, so that caused oil prices to shoot way up. And then 1980s, oil prices fell just as fast. When they fell that fast, basically every single major bank in Texas failed because they were overexposed to energy. Now, I don't think we're going to see that this time. And we may. I doubt it, though, but we may. But the point being that those banks that are in the oil patch, highly exposed to it, are going to most likely take larger losses than your big, well-diversified banks.
Yeah. Something that I've actually been seeing in a lot of 10Qs this quarter is banks will, where they normally wouldn't have said anything at all, devote at least 2 or 3 sentences explaining what their exposure to the energy industry is and what they have done in terms of reserves for that. Obviously, like I said, some banks are super duper exposed. I think the bank that I've seen the most, I can't remember which one it was, but I think it was
Cullen/Frost, maybe.
Was it around, I can't remember, it's something like 80% of its portfolio was energy related in some way, shape, or form.
Oh, I don't know who that is.
I can't remember who it was. I read a lot of articles every day since I'm also an editor, so it's lost somewhere in the haze of editing. But it's just like, that's a massive exposure. Like that, and it was a fairly small bank, as I recall. So like they're probably in a lot of trouble. And as I recall, they raised their reserves quite a bit. But I don't know.
But here's the thing, Gabby. Like, let's say that you look at that bank, right? And you look back 30 years or 40 years, and they've made it through all these other cycles. There may be a very good possibility that they know exactly what they're doing going into this thing, and they know exactly what they're doing to get out of it. So it's a very, very, very fact-specific situation. But there are instances, like Cullen/Frost has been around, I can't remember, like for over 100 years, and they're an oil patch bank, and they've made it through a whole bunch of different crises. So, it seems to me that they know how to get through these things, you know what I mean? Whereas maybe a bank that's newer, that hasn't been through all this stuff that's facing the oil patch, your confidence in them probably should not be very high.
Right. So I think ultimately what we're saying to our 2 listeners who both asked about this is, 1, it depends on the bank, right? It depends on the size. It depends where it is. It depends on what its portfolio looks like. 2, it depends on what the bank is doing. And 3, it depends on the bank's history. So it's just the same as any other company that we look at the Motley Fool, where we're looking at its fundamentals and we're looking at its history. And although that's never a guarantee that a company is going to pull through and succeed, it's certainly a good indicator of whether or not it's gonna be okay.